Hi, my name is Charlie. Today I'm going to talk about how mathematics, memory palaces, mnemonics, guitar frets, and the 12 notes of Western music theory is going to all match together. Mathematics, music composing, and all that, and one book review of Tests of the Dubervilles. Because it's going to be a small section of this video, and it's just going to be a short video. And I just wanted to continue on with the section about how I talked about syntax and grammar matching with mathematics. Maybe I was not so elaborate, but I guess the more I talk about this, the more elaborate I'll become. And the more writing I'll do about this, it's been a talked about subject for millennia. Pythagoras had a section in his theories where music and mathematics match. Newton did something similar. He did with how colors and vibrations match. But like to us, it's too far away, right? But it's not too far away. This concept of how mathematics and music matches. It's very intimate to us. It's between all of our fibers. It's between the bones of our existence. It's in every movement we make. It's in every vibration we feel. And of course, you can't separate it with just 12 notes. But just to appreciate this fact is very important. So, should I start with the book review? I think I've only finished. This is the Test of the Dubervilles I'm reading, and now I'm just around page 174. I mean, it's a great read, Maybe I'll start with the book review, I don't know. But before I do that, I just felt, just reading from Thomas Hardy, again, that the way he writes is just much more matching to me. And maybe more easier than Fitzgerald or Hemingway. For me, at least for me. Maybe it's because he's more of a modern writer from England or something. It's just like how Tess used to, was just a very pretty girl, and her schoolmate, at that time she went to school. And then her father was not a very a rich man. I think he's a cripple or something like that. And he demands that she marries her cousin or something like that, who's more rich. But she denies that, and then she went, and after all that, because that opportunity is missed, she has to live, and she has to live in a farm. She has to work at a farm because she missed that opportunity to become a rich girl. And for the family, she's kind of in a shameful position then, right? And going to a new farm, she meets another guy. Maybe she met him before in a party. She even meets the milkman. But that man's name is Angel Clare, and she kind of likes him, and he likes her. And this guy seems like a decent, educated, sophisticated guy. I really don't care, like his emotional depth or his education. I really don't care. It's just a fiction book. But I found it interesting how English people view aristocracy, how they view what is an educated man, what is not an educated man, what is a person who has emotional depth, what is a person who has no emotional depth. Thinking about that in terms of Thomas Hardy's book, it bears to the fact that people are so different, because I don't only read English books. I read Korean, Chinese books. and they have their own literature, even around the 18th century, of course. Thomas Hardy is around the 20th century, in the 18th century, but sometimes it's a struggle for me because I don't think completely in terms of Western values, but I understand it very much, actually, sometimes more than the Eastern values. But the times I actually because I read too much volume of Eastern books, sometimes I get confused, how people think. So I have to adapt with history, and it becomes very confusing. Anyhow, that's why fiction may be a slow part for me, but at the same time, maybe I can be more in tune with, the fundamentals, at least. Perhaps because I'm not following the traditional path. I'm just trying to follow the underlying mathematical part of how an author thinks when he writes fiction. What is his culture? Why? How is Ted's thinking? If there's a script just around where I finished reading, where Ted's love interest, Angel Clare, talks to his father about evangelism, him preaching, getting scolded by a young man at his old age, and it's a description from Thomas Hardy about Angel Clare, about how he knows a lot about how women think. When they say no, they actually mean yes, and all that. It's very interesting how in the 1900s, how men thought about women, or the dynamics between the father and son, between Tess and his father. Angel Clare to Mr. Clare, how he doesn't want to disrespect his father, but maybe not in a beautiful way, but more in an emotional way. He truly respects his father. He loves his father. He doesn't want to hurt his father by being too reckless in terms of who he marries, which is going to be Claire. I don't know if he's really going to marry her. It's just speculation in terms of how much I've read. Saying, really thinking about this, I'm not very sure that university students or English students in England really thinks like me in terms of reading Thomas Hardy. They don't really care about the culture because they're already ingrained in the culture. They don't really investigate how people thought at that time, because that's how they live right now. History kind of repeats. But for me, I'm on the outside, so I'm looking at it in a third view. But I have an advantage in the sense that I can speak English, I can speak Korean, but I can see two cultures in the very depth of their words, in the depths and the rhythms of their diction, of their how they word things with their fiction, how it leaves a lot of room. I know I only did a review of Tessa de Gilbert, only half of it, about the page of 147. I think the whole pages are around 350 pages. I'm just saying. Where does it all boil down to? You could say, just reading comprehension, but there's a limit to that. The reading comprehension. It's just what does that all mean? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter much, right? Who died first, who married whom, who's the love interest to the other person. It's just it's a very surface level thing compared to what the author thinks throughout. How does the author think about this character and the scenery? About how the English people did milk and what food they ate, like blood pudding or like that. I never see those things. I never saw a blood pudding in my life, except for pictures or videos. So when you account for all that, it boils down to not just comprehension or plot. It boils down to the wordings, the diction, the rhythms of the words, the feeling behind the words that Thomas Hardy wrote in the book. That becomes more important, at least for me. And I think that is the most fundamental part. So syntax becomes more important. Syntax, the rhythms. And then when syntax becomes important, then it becomes the poetry and the musicality becomes much more important for fiction. Because fiction is not really prose, right? It's more poetry. Poetry becomes more about rhythms and rhymes. For me. So, enough with the book review, because I've already talked about it. I'll elaborate it much more with my writing. I'm just saying, this all pertains, again, I'm talking about with the previous video, how it connects, it connects in terms of just how you can't, to be more fundamentally sound in terms of educating yourself, learning. Don't look at the surface, the plot or something like that. You have to look at the underlying structure of things, as just per what I said. And then the last note, of course, is connected to all this. Then, how does mathematics relate to poetry, music? Right now, I'm investigating how 12 notes or 16 notes on Arabian structures, how that relates to guitar frets. I play the guitar, I play the piano, but right now I'm struggling with the frets of the guitar. I'm trying to memorize it. But I felt like, there are a lot of videos saying, oh, you have to memorize it in terms of like mnemonics or something like that. And of course, even mnemonics can be applied in terms of mathematics, but they don't speak that in terms of that. They say mnemonics in terms of just memorization and rote memory. The 12 notes, it's the same. Although do re mi fa sol is not it's a major scale, right? But it's not the same. It's not cut up at the same degrees. It's not the same degree of 12 notes. It's a major scale or the minor scale is cut up 2 degrees up, 2 degrees up, and then 1 degree up from mi to fa. 2 degrees up, 2 degrees up, 2 degrees up, the 3 of them, and then ti to do, it's another 1 degree up. Just trying to understand that. Why is it like that? Why is the major scale like that? Just to understand that the human brain registers that in terms, when it's cut up like that with the 12 notes to skipping to do re mi fa sol la si do, people feel it more happy. But when it's minor, it's cut up in a different way, but people feel it in a sad way. But that's only the Western tradition. What about the Eastern? Maybe there's something similar, but you can't really just divide it up with minor to major. It doesn't work that way. So that is what I'm studying. So in those terms, we could say mathematics and music theory matches. Just ruminating on the fact, with these 12 notes, why is the major more happy? Why is the minor unhappy? It's just a different way of dividing up, notes. That's all it is. But we feel one thing in a different sense, but the other thing in another sense. So how does this relate to guitar frets? Well, the guitar frets had 12 notes. I don't know, 12, like 12 frets with 6 strings. And I just said, I mean, at least cut up there, and then there's more frets, but I'm just saying like what's shown, what we can access very easily. Just as I said, 12 notes. Just memorizing these guitar frets like was always I could logically see how this fret was a T or a La, A or a B, whatever it is. But to ruminate on it mathematically was much more faster thing. To memorize it was also fast, but it had no logic to it. It had no reason or a root behind it. There's no roots. It's just memorization, rote memory. I mean, it comes to mind with Breaking Bad. I was watching that drama where Gail Baedeker, or something like that, right? And Walter White was making fun of, not making fun, but kind of like condescendingly talking about Gail Baedeker after his death to Hank Schrader, who's a policeman. Hank Schrader said maybe he's a genius, maybe he's a meth cook. If he changes direction in terms of doing chemistry, he might have been a big guy. But Walter White was like saying, oh no, I think he's just a rote memorizer. He's not really a good chemist. And there's a lot of instances in Breaking Bad where I really love Breaking Bad, where Walter White makes fun of another person just being a rote memorizer. But there's a reason to that. If you're a rote memorizer, and even Vincent in Breaking Bad got killed because he was trying to prove that he's valuable just as much as Walter White. But all he did was he knew only how to cook meth. Didn't mean he understood the processes. So if any instance got an error or something bad happened, or maybe an ingredient changes, a different company makes an ingredient, Vincent starts not knowing how to make the same meth as, or 99% pure as Walter White. Same with Jesse. That's the difference between a person who truly knows music and truly does, not music, but chemistry, and a person who doesn't know chemistry. And he can make 99% pure meth, and a person who can make 96% pure meth. Because any standard deviations, he can control it, while a person who just knows to cook can't control it. So, if you can do this with music theory, with guitar frets, then I can do it with violin, then I can do it with guqin. Guqin is a Chinese instrument, guitar. I can do it with the sitar of Indian music. So that was the goal of mine, right? And most musicians don't really think about this, You don't think about this. You don't think if you learn sitar, do you think you're not learning the guqin? You're not gonna. Don't you think if you do that, if you know how to play it, you're gonna learn much more about the Chinese culture, Chinese literature. That was my goal, trying to understand the people around that. Maybe you can play the nocturnes of Chopin very easily, very, very well. But it's going to be all about tradition. You're not really going to truly understand Chopin. You're not going to truly understand Beethoven because you're not understanding the fundamentals. It's a loaded concept. It's a what do you call it? Cliche or something. You have to understand the proofs of mathematics. Don't just memorize it. It's true. But here, I don't want to talk in cliches. I want to talk about it in a new sense where you can understand. This is a good example. So this is how guitar frets and music composing, translates to mathematics. Next time, maybe I'll talk about how creating Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow, how that relates to music. And doing all this all relates to composing music. Because when you put yourself in a flow, the most fundamental sense, how I explained it, you can make music in a more fundamentally sound, more better way. And you can be diligent at it every day, writing music every day, not writing music like without diligence. That's the key point here. Last thing I'm going to talk about is memory palaces and mnemonics. With mnemonics, you can do the same thing. You can memorize it with just like very shocking sounding words with mnemonics. Sexually shocking or violently shocking, doesn't matter. But if you put mnemonics with the mathematics of words, the memory sinks in much more easily, much more deeper. Because with the rhythms, there's silence and sound. And when there's silence and sound, it's more fundamental. When it's just sound, that's rote memory. But when there's silence and sound, rhythms and mathematics between it, that's when there's true seeping into the heart as we speak. So how can that relate to memory palaces? Of course. For memory palaces, I found I could memorize Hanzu, Chinese characters, much more when I was able to draw human faces, when I was able to draw architecture, when I was able to draw nature and animals and figures of humans, and not just their face. Why? Because my conceptualization in terms of my eyes and my sight becomes much more sophisticated in terms of maybe not just words, but in terms of like the bigger structure of things, the forest opposed to the trees. And not just with drawing, but from music composing to music performance. Great composers are not, they sometimes are not very good music performers. But like there's no use in terms of making music when you don't perform it. That's the essence of music, where the body and mind kind of matches. Knowledge, composition, but also the playing of music is just as important. Interpreters of music, this may be deemed more greater than the composed one, the Segovia songs. So in terms of that, music performance itself is a memory palace. Because every detail, every fingertips becomes a significant matter. Much more things to memorize then. But it's not boring type of memory. It's a memory that's meaningful. It's meaningful because there are silences and sound interchanging with rhythms. It's meaningful. It's not unmeaningful. So that is how memory palaces and mnemonics also adds to this. Although for me, I only use memory palaces and mnemonics in terms of short-term memory. I don't really use it for long-term memory. If I can use it for long-term memory, maybe I'll use it, but that'll be later. And I found much more better note-taking, the aesthetics of note-taking helps with memory palaces and mnemonics. Because when you create a structure that's most in priority with mnemonics and memory palaces, you can make a filing system in terms of memory palaces where you can store memory that's more important. And you don't, because you have your priorities straight, you don't make like 5 memory palaces that are unmeaningful. Because you have priorities, you can reference to one memory palace as the most important and put files within that. Because with every detail, just like music performance, every little detail of architecture made with memory palaces becomes significant and you can store memory in it. But memory is created in such a sense where you can't create memory force, rote. But when it's musical, it becomes much more easier. You can memorize much more. I think this is the best mathematical way of speaking why emotions are very important in terms of learning. And it's true, you can't deny this. It's how the world works. Peace. Stop denying the real world. Anyways, thank you for listening. I'll try to elaborate on it with writing. It will be much more detailed. And if you want it more written in detail with writing, please comment. But otherwise, like, subscribe, comment, whatever you like. Thank you.